Your choice reveals a recurring pattern, not because a glove has magical power, but because the psyche recognizes symbols before the mind builds explanations. In a Jungian test like this, what pulls you first often mirrors the way you protect yourself, the way you reach for life, and the way you avoid certain forms of pain without even noticing. A glove is never just a glove here. It is a way of touching the world while trying not to be hurt by it, a small image of your shadow, your persona, and the hidden mechanism that steps in when your heart does not feel fully safe. So do not overthink this. Just look at the 5 gloves, choose one from 1 to 5 and stay with the first one that stirs something in you. Do not compare, do not correct, do not try to be clever. First impressions matter more than logic in Jung's test, because the deeper self speaks faster than the rational mind. Keep your number with you, because by the end, I will connect your choice to something concrete, practical and personal, a small step you can actually take today, and only at the end will the full meaning of your choice become clear. But before we go any further, pause the video and leave your name in the comments. Let this moment become real. Let this test have meaning. Sometimes healing begins not when you understand everything, but when you quietly admit that something in you is ready to be seen. If you chose option 1, this usually happens when you feel more than you show, notice more than you say, and carry a private intensity that other people sense without fully understanding. Stay with me, because this choice is rarely random. This glove does not speak the language of softness first. It speaks the language of guarded power, hidden fire, and inner knowledge. In simple Jungian terms, it often appears when the shadow has become a protector. Not the shadow as something evil, but as the part of you that learned to hide its tenderness behind control, mystery, sharp perception, or emotional self-containment. Pay attention to this. Some people protect themselves by becoming loud. Others protect themselves by becoming needed. But people drawn to option 1 often protect themselves by becoming unreadable. They reveal depth in symbols, in hints, in fragments, in half-confessions, while the most vulnerable truth remains locked behind the gate. That is why this glove looks charged, almost sacred. It suggests the archetype of the magician in shadow, the one who senses invisible patterns, reads the room quickly, understands human contradictions, yet struggles to place their own heart in plain sight. The light in this archetype is intuition, emotional intelligence, and the strange gift of seeing what others miss. The shadow in this archetype is distance, secrecy, testing people before trusting them, and confusing being hidden with being safe. Here is the everyday version of it. Someone asks how you are and you answer with intelligence, humor, or a beautiful phrase, but not with the real thing. You can support everyone else with surprising clarity, yet when pain reaches your own chest, you turn it into silence, productivity, aesthetics, or private rituals of self-control. You may even feel disappointed that people do not understand you, while at the same time giving them almost no clear path toward your truth. That is the loop. You want depth, but you fear exposure. You want contact, but you keep one hand behind the curtain. And often this did not begin from arrogance. It may have begun from a moment or many moments when openness felt unsafe, when being fully seen led to shame, betrayal, dismissal, or misunderstanding. So the psyche adapted. It said, "Let me become powerful before I become visible. Let me become symbolic before I become simple. Let me be felt, but never fully reached." See what happens here. The defense that once protected your inner fire may now be the same defense that prevents warmth from reaching it. You are not too intense. You are not too complicated. You may simply be carrying a heart that learned to survive by becoming difficult to touch. And that matters, because once you see the pattern, it no longer has to rule you. Today, send one honest message to one person you trust, using only plain language. No jokes, no poetic disguise, no vague phrasing. Write one sentence that begins with, "I feel," then name the feeling directly and do not edit it for style. That small act matters more than it seems, because for your pattern, healing does not begin with being understood perfectly. It begins with letting something real be seen before fear has time to dress it in armor. If you choose option 2, this message usually appears when a part of you wants closeness, truth, and relief, while another part stays on guard and keeps everything precise, efficient, and under control. This glove carries the image of cold light, metal edges, and perfect response. It does not look soft, yet it shines. That matters. In simple Jungian language, this is often the sign of a split between the self that feels and the self that manages. One part of you longs to rest, to be known, to stop performing strength every second. Another part, usually older and faster, steps in like armor and says, "Not now, stay sharp, stay useful, stay ahead of the feeling." Pay attention to that, because this pattern is subtle. It does not always look like fear, it often looks like competence. It looks like answering quickly, fixing the problem, holding the schedule, keeping your voice steady, giving the right advice, and moving on before the emotional weight of the moment has time to land. That is the shadow here. Not darkness in a dramatic sense, but the hidden cost of being the one who functions so well that even you forget what is happening inside you. There is usually an inner conflict beneath this. Desire says, "I want to be met." Fear says, "If I slow down, everything I have kept contained may come closer than I can handle." Desire says, "Tell the truth." Fear says, "Stay polished and useful, because usefulness feels safer than exposure. Stay with me here, because this is where the tension rises." The gift in this pattern is real. You may be remarkably reliable under pressure. You may think clearly when others panic. You may walk into confusion and bring structure. But what protects you can also isolate you. You can become so good at regulating the scene that no one notices you are not truly inside it. Picture an ordinary evening. Someone close to you asks a simple question. Maybe, "Are you okay?" Maybe, "What is wrong?" Maybe, "Why do you seem far away?" You feel the answer for a second in your chest, raw and immediate. Then almost instantly the system activates. You smile a little. You say you are just tired. You mention work. You redirect. You ask about their day. The moment passes. Nothing explodes. Nothing looks broken. Yet something important has been pushed back into the shadows again. See the image clearly. A glowing hand, strong and capable, reaching into the world through a layer of polished defense. This is not because you are cold. It is often because somewhere in your story, chaos taught you to value control more than contact. Maybe emotions around you once felt messy, unpredictable, or too expensive. Maybe being calm was rewarded, and being overwhelmed felt dangerous. So now the persona of efficiency steps forward before the softer self can speak. Here is the mini-climax. The very strategy that helped you survive may now be the thing that keeps comfort from reaching you. That is why this choice appears now. Not to shame you, but to show you the mechanism while it is still running. Once you can see it, you can interrupt it. Today, set a timer for 15 minutes, sit somewhere with no screen and no task, and write 3 honest answers to these questions without editing them. What am I feeling right now? What am I avoiding by staying busy? What do I need that I have not said out loud? When the timer ends, read the answers once slowly. Do not fix them. Do not explain them away. Let them stand. For your pattern, that small act is not weakness. It is contact. If you could choose 3, it usually means something in you is tired of carrying responsibility without certainty, and tired of appearing steady when, beneath the surface, your heart is still negotiating with fear. This glove has the feeling of something worn, tested, real. It does not shine to impress. It lasts. That is why it often calls the person who has built a life around endurance, reliability, and quiet self-control. In Jungian language, this can point to a schema that says, if I keep going, if I stay useful, if I do not ask for too much, then I will remain safe, respected, and needed. But stay close to this idea, because the same schema that once helped you survive can slowly become a prison. The persona here is the strong one, the dependable one, the person who always finds a way, always keeps the promise, always absorbs the pressure. And yet, the shadow underneath often holds something very different. It holds avoidance. Not dramatic avoidance, not running away from life, but the quieter form, the kind that delays a real decision, postpones a difficult conversation, or keeps saying, "I will deal with that later," while the emotional debt quietly grows in the background. You may look practical, but inside there can be a constant tension between what you know and what you commit to. That is the psychological story of this glove. It belongs to someone who learned that stability matters, but who may now be using steadiness to avoid change. Picture an ordinary scene. At work, you know a task has outgrown your energy, but you keep saying yes because saying no would force a truth into the room. In a relationship, you sense a conversation needs to happen, yet you wait for a cleaner moment, a calmer week, a better mood, as if clarity will arrive by itself. In daily life, you promise yourself you will make the call, send the message, choose the direction, set the boundary, but another day passes, and the promise becomes one more thing you quietly carry. Here's an unexpected twist. What looks like patience is often fear wearing a respectable face. That is why option 3 is so revealing. It often appears when the soul is no longer asking for more strength, but for more honesty. Not honesty in theory, but honesty in action. Because the deeper issue is not that you do not know what matters. Usually you do. The real issue is that avoidance has learned to dress itself as caution, and the persona of the reliable one keeps the pattern alive by making delay look reasonable. See what happens next. Once you see that, something changes. You stop admiring your own postponement. You stop calling indecision maturity. You begin to notice that every unlived decision steals energy from the life you are trying to protect. Still, there is a gift in this pattern. You are resilient. You are grounded. You can stay present in difficulty longer than most people. But your growth now depends on using that endurance differently, not to remain in the hallway between choices, but to walk through one door. Today, choose one postponed decision that has followed you for at least a week. Set a timer for 15 minutes. Write down the exact next step and complete that step before the timer ends. If it is a message, send it. If it is a yes or no, say it clearly. If it is a promise to yourself, put it on the calendar and lock the time. For your pattern, healing begins the moment commitment becomes movement. If you chose 4, this usually appears when control feels safer than surrender, and when a quiet fear inside you believes that if you loosen your grip, you may lose something important: respect, stability, love, or even the image of who you have worked so hard to become. This choice has elegance, but it also has tension. It does not simply protect the hand, it protects status, composure, and the feeling of remaining above the chaos. In a short Jungian sense, this is often where the persona becomes very polished, while the shadow holds the mess that is not allowed to show. The limitation is not that you are weak. The limitation is that you may only feel safe when you are controlled, prepared, and difficult to disturb. Stay with this because it is more common than it looks. Many people who choose this type of symbol are not obsessed with perfection for shallow reasons. They learned somewhere in life that being composed brought safety, approval, or dignity, while being uncertain, emotional, or visibly affected felt risky. So the psyche adapted. It built a beautiful form, a strong exterior, a careful rhythm. But fear of change often hides inside that beauty because change threatens the arrangement. Change asks you to stop managing every impression. Change asks you to let truth matter more than image. And that is where the inner conflict begins. You may say you want peace, but sometimes what you really protect is control. You may say you want honesty, but sometimes you only welcome honesty that does not disturb the role you are playing. You recognize yourself in this more than you usually admit. You hold yourself together with grace, yet there are moments when the effort of appearing fine becomes heavier than the problem itself. Picture an ordinary day. Someone close to you asks a direct question about what you really want, or what is no longer working, or whether you are hurt. You know the answer almost instantly. It rises in you like a clear signal. But instead of saying it, you soften it, reshape it, delay it, or make it sound more acceptable. You choose diplomacy over truth, not because you are false, but because truth without control feels too exposed. That is the shadow at work. It protects you, but it also keeps you trapped inside a version of yourself that always has to look intact. Here is the deeper point. The fear is not only about losing something outside you, it is also about losing the identity that has helped you survive. And yet the very thing you are afraid to surrender may be the doorway to a more honest life. Today, choose one situation you have been managing too carefully and give one clear answer with no decoration. Yes, I want this. No, I do not. Say it plainly once to the person involved or to yourself in writing before the day ends. For your pattern, growth begins when truth becomes more valuable than the comfort of control. If you chose 5, this usually appears when something in you is no longer willing to live by the old order, even if part of you still pretends nothing has changed. This choice carries movement. It carries the feeling of a door opening from the inside. Not a comfortable opening, not a neat one, but a living one. In simple Jungian terms, this points toward individuation, which is just another way of saying that the self is trying to become whole. Parts of you that were silent want a voice now. Parts of you that were split off want to come back into the center. That process always asks for courage, because integration is not a pleasant idea from a distance. It is a real decision to stop calling an old pattern your identity. Pay attention to that. Option 5 often appears when the psyche is done negotiating with delay. The surface of life may still look normal. You still go to work, answer messages, follow your routines, and say the usual things. But underneath, something has already broken with the established order. You feel it when a habit no longer fits, when a role feels too narrow, when a conversation keeps following you into quiet moments, when a decision you postponed starts asking for a real answer. This is the energy of inner change before outer proof. That is why it can feel both exciting and unsettling. One part of you wants to move. Another part wants one more week, one more sign, one more perfect mood, one more reason to wait. Stay with this tension because it matters. The shadow here is not weakness. The shadow is postponement dressed as preparation. It is knowing and not acting. It is sensing that a chapter is ending while still arranging the furniture inside it. You do this in smaller ways than you may admit. You say you will change your routine, but keep protecting the same comfort. You know a conversation needs to happen, but you rehearse it in your head instead of speaking. You feel that a decision has already formed inside you, but you keep asking for certainty when what you really need is courage. That is the deeper message of this glove. Transformation does not begin when fear disappears. It begins when truth becomes more important than the structure built to contain it. Picture an ordinary evening. You are looking at your phone. There is a message you have delayed sending, or a number you keep meaning to call, or a note to yourself about a habit you want to change. You feel the familiar split. One voice says tomorrow. Another voice, quieter but stronger, says the delay is the pattern. That is the moment. That is where individuation stops being an idea and becomes a path. Not through grand declarations, but through one honest movement that the old version of you would have avoided. Today, choose one change you already know is necessary and make it irreversible before the day ends. Send the message, cancel the thing you have outgrown, put the meeting on the calendar, remove the object, app, or excuse that keeps the old cycle alive. Make the step small but make it real. For your pattern, healing does not come from thinking beautifully about change. It comes from proving to yourself that the new self is not a fantasy. It is already acting. What all 5 choices reveal is not 5 separate personalities, but 5 different ways of protecting the same vulnerable place. One person avoids through mystery. Another avoids through control. Another through endurance. Another through image. Another through constant movement toward change. The surface looks different, but the pattern underneath is deeply familiar. It is the human pattern of repeating what once felt safe, even when it no longer brings peace. In simple Jungian language, this is how a hidden fear becomes a visible style. The psyche creates a form, a role, a gesture, a way of touching life, and then begins to live through it so often that it starts to feel natural. That is why a symbolic choice can matter. What you chose was not just an object. It was a small mirror. It showed how you reach, how you protect, how you hold back, and how you try to stay connected without being hurt in the same old way again. Stay with this, because this is where the deeper meaning appears. The pattern is not proof that something is wrong with you. The pattern is proof that something in you once had to adapt. Repetition is rarely random. Avoidance is rarely laziness. Hidden fear is rarely visible from the outside. It often wears the face of competence, dignity, patience, insight, or strength. But once you can see the repetition, The repetition loses some of its power. That is the turning point. Jung believed that what remains unconscious can direct a life from the shadows, but what becomes conscious can begin to change form. That is why this moment matters. You are not leaving this reading empty-handed. You are leaving it with language for something you may have felt for a long time without naming, and naming it is already a form of movement. Naming it is already a quiet victory. There is a sense of accomplishment in that, even if the work ahead is still unfolding. You saw the pattern. You recognized the mechanism. You stayed long enough to feel where the symbol touched your real life. That is not small. That is the beginning of integration. Integration does not mean becoming perfect. It means allowing the parts of you that protect, fear, hesitate, perform, and hope to come into awareness so they no longer have to rule from behind the curtain. That is the new beginning here. Not a dramatic reinvention, but a more honest relationship with yourself. A little less automatic, a little more awake, a little more able to choose instead of repeat. Today, notice the first moment when you almost fall into your usual pattern, whether that means withdrawing, controlling, delaying, pleasing, or hiding, and pause for 1 full minute before you act. In that minute, ask yourself one simple question. What am I trying to protect right now? Then choose one response that is slightly more honest than your usual one. That small pause is where the old cycle weakens and the new self begins. The real test begins after this video. It begins in ordinary life, in real conversations, in small decisions, in the next moment when your old pattern asks to lead, and you finally notice that you have another choice. If something in this reading felt personal, do not leave it here as just another passing moment. Let it be real. Let it mark something. Please indicate your chosen number in the comments. Please type your name. I want this to feel less like a video and more like a point of contact between what you sensed inside yourself and what you are finally willing to admit. Sometimes the smallest gesture is the one that gives meaning to the whole experience, and writing your number and your name is a way of saying that this was not random, that something in you recognized the pattern and decided to stop looking away. If this reached you in a place that words usually do not reach, like this, not out of habit, but as a quiet sign that this message found you at the right time. Subscribe if you want to keep going deeper, if you want more of these symbolic tests, and if you know there is still something in you waiting to be understood with more honesty and less fear. Do not close this moment too quickly. Stay with what stirred in you. Stay with the image you chose. Stay with the truth that followed. And when you are ready to take the next step, watch the next test on your screen right now. Let this be the beginning of a different kind of attention, the kind that helps you see yourself clearly, gently, and without turning away again. You have already done the hardest part, which is noticing that your choice was not empty and that your reactions have a story behind them. Now give that story a voice, give it a witness, give it one simple action so it does not disappear the moment the video ends. There are times when healing begins with a grand decision, but more often it begins with a quiet acknowledgement, with a comment, with a name, with the courage to stay present for one more layer of truth. That is why I'm asking you not to rush away. Let your response stay here, let your name stay here, let your choice stay here, and let this be the quiet moment when you stop scrolling past yourself and choose to remain.